Because of the title especially, I haven't really thought about what I'm going to say. I'm going to just let it come. But first of all, of course, we must appreciate that the founders of practically all the religions themselves were definitely thinking outside the box of their contemporary culture and beliefs. The Buddha, for example, definitely thought things through for himself. And while he did not reject his whole culture of, a kind of spiritual box in which he was brought up, he nonetheless, he reinvented it again and saw things from a whole different perspective. It's rather like, you have a kaleidoscope which is made up of identical pieces, but as you twist it round, those pieces turn into a different pattern. You understand? Do people know what kaleidoscopes are nowadays? No? Sorry. Well, your mummy will have to explain. When I was your age, we loved kaleidoscopes, actually. But nowadays, I guess, they're all into computer games. So anyway, just as the Buddha, he took a lot of things which were extant in his day, ideas which were extant in his day. He didn't reject everything just because it was current, but he nonetheless revisited it and re-evaluated it, and then through his own enlightenment experience, the pieces all fell into a rather different pattern, which in his day was quite revolutionary. I mean, you think, what was the Buddha talking about? Well, he was talking about, for a start, dukkha. He was talking about, he had just gotten enlightened, for God's sake. There we are all trying to be enlightened. He'd gotten there. After 4 incalculable eons of trying, there he was, he made it. Damn it. And then he talks about dukkha. He talks about the unsatisfactory nature of our unenlightened consciousness. He talks about the fact that we suffer. That although we want happiness and we put so much effort into being happy, because we're deluded, we mess it all up. And we create so many problems for ourselves and for all those around us. And eventually, as we say in this day and age, for the whole planet. He talked about dukkha. And he talked about the causes of dukkha. Our grasping, clinging mind. We'll deal with this a bit more later. And he dealt with selflessness. He didn't talk much, actually, about Buddha nature. He talked about how we are not who we think we are. But he didn't really talk much about who we really are. Because he knew that we cannot really understand the unconditioned through the conditioned mind. The ultimate experience is beyond words, so words cannot encompass limits immediately. So he didn't really talk much. He called it nirvana. And basically he said, when you get there, you'll probably know. And until then, anything we say about it will just be grasped by our egoistic conceptual mind and made into another concept. This is the path. Walk the path, and if you walk it sincerely, you'll get there. When you get there, you'll know. So he himself was outside of the box of the current society and religious framework of his day. But of course, as happens with all great religious leaders, then their words, which were so liberating, so free, become boxed up. It all then is memorized, eventually written down, and you're back in the box again. This is our dilemma for all of us on a spiritual path, because on the one hand we are seeking to go beyond the confines of ordinary conceptual societal thinking, but at the same time we need that as a support. So this is when it gets sort of interesting, really. Most of you here were brought up either in the West or in fairly affluent, educated, middle-class Indian backgrounds. So therefore, by coming to a Buddhist center, you are already outside of the box of your own culture. Which is good. But the problem is that then you find yourself sitting in somebody else's box. I have some couple behind me. Do you understand what I'm saying? Good. He's got it. Here we're talking about Buddhism. So Buddhism has survived for 2,600 years, basically by putting itself in boxes. To change the analogy a little, just slightly, imagine it's like the Buddha Dharma is like water or a very precious elixir. Now, that has to be contained. So it is then placed in various vessels. Glass vessels, crystal glass, golden, silver, fine porcelain. But always the same elixir is poured in. But it takes on a different shape and sometimes a different color because of the vessel which is containing it. And that is perfectly all right. It has to be. The liquid, the elixir has to be contained. The problem is when we get fascinated by the vessel and forget the elixir. When we get very fascinated by the fine porcelain with the dragons all around it, or the intricate gold work, or the fine sparkling crystal glass containers, we get fascinated with that. How beautiful. But we forget that it's just a container. That is not it. it's so much more colorful, so much more beautiful, so much more approachable than the elixir, which looks like plain water. And we get fascinated by the container, and we forget what it contains. This is the danger. So in this modern day, we have obviously Tibetan Buddhism, Indian Buddhism, Sri Lankan Buddhism, Thai Buddhism, Burmese Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism, Korean Buddhism. And they are all Dharma. They all contain the elixir. But so often, even the people practicing forget that what they are protecting is not the vessel, it's the liquid inside the vessel. And so this is a problem more for people coming from outside. When I first started practicing with my Lama Kamcha Rinpoche, he said, and this was years ago, 50 years ago, he said, you must remember that Tibetan Buddhism is half Tibetan culture and half Buddhism. So you can throw out the culture, just don't throw out the Dharma. So this sounds nice, right? Culture here, Dharma here, boom. But of course it isn't like that, right? Because in fact, this idea of the vessel and the elixir is only good on a certain point. Because actually the two have mixed like this. And sometimes it's very difficult to know which is just culture and which is the genuine Dharma. But as much as possible, even while we assimilate ourselves with the outer trappings, we must not get caught up in thinking that the outer trappings are the Dharma. They're just outer trappings. I mean, if you're in doubt, think of the Buddha. If you had met the Buddha today, I mean, as he was then, 2,600 years ago, you'd walk past him, you'd think he's some old scruffy sadhu. I mean, you look at the Vinaya, right? Monks are not allowed to wash except once or twice a month, unless it's monsoon. Imagine what that would have been like, right? In Bihar. Monks are supposed to gather their robes from the charnel grounds. In other words, after the bodies have been burned, any kind of material which is left over from the burning and so forth, they pick it up, they sew it all together. This is why the robes are supposed to be in patches. That's why. Because you get supposed to go to rubbish heaps and charnel grounds, pick up whatever material you could find, sew it together and dye it. Imagine what the monks look like. The Buddha himself went on alms round every day, unless he was invited to a home to eat. So I think the Buddha himself, I sometimes wonder, but this is a provocative talk, so I can say what I like. I sometimes visualize Jesus, Muhammad, and the Buddha up there looking down and having a bet whose religion has moved furthest away from what they were trying to talk about. So Buddhism has been going now for 2,600 years. And to my mind, what is truly extraordinary is that despite the difference in the vessels containing the Dharma elixir, how untainted the actual elixir still is. The actual liquid there is still there. You sometimes have to look for it. But to today, you have still people sincerely studying and sincerely practicing and sincerely realizing and gaining the accomplishments. So after 2,600 years, that's pretty amazing. There are still accomplished beings in this world. I think the Buddha would have been very happy about that. He might not have been so happy about other things, but this is dukkha and samsara, so he would not have been surprised. So what does it mean to think outside the box? We, all of us, live and swim within a world of concepts. And our first very powerful concept deals with who we are, who we think we are. From when we're very small, even all of you, yeah? You have ideas about who you are. I'm very sure you have very strong ideas of who you are. And you want everyone else to know about it. We have very strong ideas. We think, well, for a start, we identify with our gender, with our nationality, with our race, with our social class, with our education, and then we are always somebody's son or daughter, somebody's brother or sister, somebody's husband or wife, somebody's mother or father. We play so many roles. And we have all our memories, which tells us who we are. I'm a happy person, I'm an unhappy person, I had a wonderful childhood, I had a terribly abusive childhood. I'm intelligent, I'm unintelligent. I'm a spiritual person, I'm totally worldly. But it's all concepts. And those concepts box us in. They say, we can do this much, I can't do more than that. These are my limits. And everything which we see and everyone which we relate to from this tight box of our very, very limited judgments, prejudices, ideas, conceptions. It's like we're in this very small prison cell. Dungeon, really. And so when we begin to start a new kind of direction in our lives, for example, most of you have come to India from somewhere else. That was a choice. The fact that you are here now listening to this talk is a choice. So in one way, this is an opening. But the important thing is not to end up, as I say, just going from one prison cell into another prison cell. Even if the new prison cell has nice decorations around the wall and burns incense. It's still a prison cell. And always the question is how to go beyond the prison. How to get out. How to be liberated. I mean, I really feel it's very important. I mean, yes, to a certain extent we have to, you know, we're trying to go from here to here, so obviously it makes sense to go along a path which is already laid out for us. And that's nothing wrong with that. But what the problem is, it's only when we try to change our identity into another identity because somehow we think that that other identity is part of the path. Am I explaining what I mean? I mean, we're not being true to who we really are. We're trying to turn ourselves into something else. In other words, all you Westerners here, you do not have to become Tibetans. It's enough for Tibetans to be Tibetans. I'm not joking. This is very serious. You do not get closer to enlightenment by pretending to be Tibetan. That is not the point. Someone I know who has now become a very good teacher, she married a High Lama, and she was living with her husband in a Tibetan camp here, and of course he had a large family, and then there was also a monastery, and she was American, and so she felt, you know, that her only hope of being accepted was to try to be as, you know, Tibetan as possible, to fit in. And the mother of her husband, of this Rinpoche, who herself was a great practitioner, she said to her, don't ever try to be Tibetan. Be who you are. Don't try to be somebody else. And she said that was the most helpful thing anyone ever said to her, because she could be herself. It didn't mean that she was not polite, that she did not observe, you know, the various protocol of the society in which she lived. But nonetheless, she didn't have to pretend to be somebody else. She could be who she was, which was why her husband married her in the first place. If he wanted to marry a Tibetan, he would have married a Tibetan. There was plenty of them. If he married her, it's because he liked her. And so she could relax and just be who she was. So therefore, this whole question of thinking outside the box means that we start, meditation really is learning how to begin to really see the way that the mind functions and creates this idea of who we are. And this is why meditation often is very difficult, because it goes counter to the way that our own egocentric mind wants to work, which is just to go with the flow and not question. And now we're questioning everything. As thoughts and feelings come up, instead of just accepting them, oh, this is who I am, we start questioning them. And we start questioning the whole idea of, who am I? Because if we think I am this and I am that, who is the I who is all these things? Sometimes it's useful just to remember those of us who believe in rebirth, that if you had met yourself in your last life, you would never have recognized yourself. And if you see yourself in your next lifetime, who's that? It's not me. It's like an actor playing many roles, you know? And there's nothing wrong with the actor seeing themselves as Hamlet. And on the stage they play Hamlet with all their heart. But the problem is when they come off the stage, if they still think they're Hamlet, they're in trouble. And so we play many roles. Even in this very lifetime, we play many roles. You know, I mean, you go to work, you're playing one role. You're at home, you're playing another role. With your wife or your husband, you're one thing. With your children, you're someone else. With your friends, you're someone else. In the Dharma center, you're somebody else. We play so many roles. And there's nothing wrong with playing roles as long as you don't believe in them. The problem only comes when we think this is who I am. The Buddha, when he started, always encouraged that people question. He was one of the great religious leaders who really said, he says it, in the Kalama Sutra of the Pali Canon. He goes to one village and the people there say to him, look, we're terribly confused. Every spiritual master that comes along, he gives his own rap about what he believes in, and he says that everybody else is wrong and we only have to believe what he says and then we'll be saved. And then the next one comes along and says the opposite thing, and again, you know, believe me, believe me. And they said, no, right now we're totally confused and we don't know how to judge who is right and who is wrong. And the Buddha, he didn't say, oh, well, that's fine, you just forget everything you've ever heard before because I'm right, I'm the Buddha. Instead, he said, you are quite right, Kalamas, to doubt. There is cause for doubt. Because all these religious leaders, they are all giving their own spiel and they contradict each other and you are confused and no wonder you're confused. So, you should listen to what people say. And then you should see, does this accord with what you know to be right or not? Put it into practice. Does it work or does it not work? Only when you yourselves have seen that this leads to something higher and that it really, really does work, then you accept it. Don't just take it because you believe in the teacher, because the teacher is very charismatic, because the teacher tells you he's enlightened, because all your friends believe in him. No. Only when you yourself have taken what they have said and tried it out and discovered it really works, then you can accept it. So Buddhism is the one religion which really allows you to inquire, really allows you, first you hear it, meaning that you study it, you read about it, you listen to teachers. Then you don't just jump over and believe it. Then you go away and you think about it. You go away and you know, Well, that was interesting. And then you start thinking about it, you start analyzing it, you compare it with other things you've heard. You really begin to try to intellectually digest it. It's like food. You take it, you eat it, then you digest it, you chew it up. And then if it's good food, you can then, the last part is you digest it and it nourishes. You absorb it into your system. So it's very important, whatever you hear, don't just believe it just because the person who's saying it is some big lama and everybody says he's enlightened. First you hear it, then you really go away and you think about it, then you put it into practice, and if it really is beneficial, then you become it. Otherwise we're stuck in the boxes again. It's a new box, but it's just a box. Can't do that. Rinpoche said, you know, oh my God, so that doesn't mean it. Offering bowls. You know, you're down to the lowest hell if your offering bowl touches, or it's too far apart, or one is here and one is there. God knows what's going to happen to you. I mean, who made this up? The Buddha never had offering bowls. You think he carried them around in his bowl with him? That is just culture. That is just society. Yes, it's good to arrange bowls and be mindful. You know, not just stick them there, but, you know, arrange them carefully and be mindful. But the idea that there's some horrible karmic results if your bowls happen to touch, I mean, it's nonsense. But, you know, Westerners get so into this, have you noticed? More than Tibetans. All these little itty-nittly things. Yes, so, you know, if anybody makes the slightest deviation, oh hell. So this is getting ourselves back into a box again. Yes, of course, we must blend in with whichever culture we are in, and be polite, and be mindful, and be careful, and not offend anyone, and whatever is their particular cultural, you know, customs, we respect those and we observe those. It's not that we have to become hedonists. It's not that we become barbarians or become selfish, oh, I can do what I like because it's all one in the Dhammadhatu. We can be very, very sensitive, but in our heart of hearts, we understand this is just culture. The important thing in the Dharma is to see things afresh, clear, as if one had never seen them before. The traditional description is like a small child in a temple, looks at all the frescoes and the decorations, and it sees them and it's delighted, but it doesn't have any idea, oh, this is good art, this is bad art, must be, you know, what school of painting it comes from and things like this. It just sees, fresh. And so we are trying to clean our minds, refresh our minds, so that we see things in a way which is new, every time anew, like something very beautiful which we just see. Because normally, as we see something, immediately our mind sets in, judging, comparing. Even the simplest thing. They, according to, it's really quite fascinating actually, according to neuroscientists nowadays, because we think that what we see with our eyes, for example, or our nose, or our ears, or, you know, whatever, all our senses, but we use here the eyes, we think that what we see is what is actually there, and that our eyes are simply refracting back to us the actual situation. But now neuroscientists have proved, until the next lot of neuroscientists come along, that actually the eyes actually pick up about 15% of the external stimuli, and the brain supplies the other 85%. Doesn't that remind you of the Buddha saying that everything is like a dream, everything is a projection, everything is a mirage? Actually, we see what we see because of the kind of sense organs we have as human beings, which we all share, and the kind of neural setup which we have in our brains. For example, I mean, someone who is colorblind genuinely does not see red and green. It's very fascinating. One time, when I was in England, I had a friend who was colorblind, and a friend was wearing a red sweater, this red, bright engine red. And I said, so what color is she wearing? I think it must be red. And I said, what colour are you seeing? And what colour he was seeing was kind of this colour. Kind of mud colour. But pink and turquoise, they pick up very quickly. They see pink and turquoise where we don't see pink and turquoise. Very interesting, actually. There's a whole book on it. So what I'm saying is that we think we're seeing the same thing, but actually it depends on our senses. And more than that, on all the neural wires in our body that create in the brain, which create and round out and then classify what we are seeing. So therefore it's very difficult for us with our conceptual mind to see beyond concepts. So we're all in boxes. And I think basically the best we can do is to try to create glass boxes and not heavy steel boxes. So that, yes, we're still within a box, but it is a translucent box, an open box. The whole of the Buddhist path is dealing with how to get beyond our ordinary, conceptual, judgmental, prejudicial mind. And so it is very important not to use that very path to create a new box, new set of concepts, because it's very easy. We learn the names of all the lamas. We know all the different kinds of meditation schools. We know all the traditions. We learn all the history. We learn all the Dharma jargon. Right? And then that way we feel safe. created another box. And it's not even our box. So, I'm not saying this very well, but what I'm trying to say is that, again, back to the beginning, don't get too obsessed with the vessel. Remember the elixir. Remember the Dharma, because the Dharma is that which will take us beyond concepts. It's not another way of getting comfortable in more alien conceptual thinking. If the Dharma is used properly, it will free us. If it is used improperly, we just become more imprisoned. Sometimes this is very difficult because also the teachers themselves are part of their own system. And they have to be. Because you see, this is where it gets difficult. Because on the one hand, you need a tradition. On one hand, we all need to be part of a living current. Like, creating a plug which you can then push into the current to get all the electricity from that current. So on the one hand, it's very important to be connected. But on the other hand, it's also important to realize that all this outer cultural baggage that goes along with it is just a vessel. It's the carrier, but it's not the thing in itself. It's necessary, but it's the Zen people say, it's the finger pointing at the moon. And people can get very obsessed with fingers. But it's not the finger that's the point. Yes, we need the finger to point there. Oh yes, there's the moon. But if we don't look, and we just get very absorbed in the finger, so we need the vessel to hold the elixir, but we mustn't forget that it is just a vessel, it's not the elixir. And unless we drink the elixir, we'll die of thirst, even if we're clutching the vessel. This is very, very important, really, because it's very easy to get very fascinated by the wrong things.